Hey folks, welcome back to Gaming Garbage, where we take a look at games, chat about the gaming news in the industry, and of course, stream for fun. Today, we don't have as long of a gaming news, but we go over this every week, and basically it's me going over news for the week that I find kind of important or relevant to my audience, and then we take time to go over it. And I try to consolidate it as best I can, but some of these do run pretty long. The idea is to get somewhere between 20, 40 minutes, somewhere in there. And so today we're going to be covering some stuff on Blizzard with some changes with Overwatch 2, which are not good. Some new stuff with, in a way, some new stuff with Diablo 4. We're going to take a look at the Rise of Ronin. Just a quick little overview of what people are saying. We're also going to take a look at, we finally got some word with XDefiant of actually what's happening. And this is a Ubisoft kind of free-to-play Call of Duty game that they have that they're going to, of course, monetize to death. But we just haven't had any word on it. It was supposed to come out summer of 2023. We're going to talk about another game that's looking at becoming a movie. And we actually talked about this not too long ago called The State of Gaming. In The State of Gaming, we take a look at kind of like a deeper dive of different facets of the industry. And we did one on games to movies and how there's just so many. And here's another one that we have. And then lastly, we'll talk about Starfield's lead quest designer talking about how kind of like the last end of the stretch there went. So thanks for tuning in. You can always follow me at Gaming Garbage 22 over at YouTube, and then you can also find me over at Twitch at Don't Tread on Thee. If you'd like to leave a private comment as a whisper, you can. Of course, subbing is always nice and liking if you enjoy the content, but please share. And for those of you that do, I appreciate that very much. So let's go ahead and dig into the Blizzard news. So first, we'll talk about Overwatch 2. And right now, Blizzard is making Overwatch 2 worse by removing story missions. I'm not even kidding. So we had Hero PvE, that was a big part of the game. The biggest part of the game actually was bringing PvE to the game. And then that ended up being canceled after being delayed a little bit because it was too hard and they couldn't basically make PvE and PvP for the game. The team wasn't big enough. And so they wanted to focus on the PvP side. Because that's where, again, that's kind of been like the lifeblood of Overwatch from the beginning. And then they've had new heroes and also skins and stuff basically locked behind a paywall. And it's also a very hard grind to get anything. And so we're talking 7 to 8 months of grinding through battle passes and stuff just to get one skin, which is insanity. That's so crazy. And then the new heroes that they release during the seasons are behind a paywall. And so, yeah, you got to pay for them. Now, this is technically was it a free-to-play game? I think this one you actually had to pay for a little bit. But yeah, I'm not sure about that one. No, I think this one was free-to-play. The other one you paid for. Overwatch 1. So now the story missions. They've had story missions with the game. And, since, hero stuff and PvE wasn't really going to be around, they're like, hey, we're going to have the story missions. But we're going to give you 3 missions that are going to work with PvP. And you're going to pay $15 for each pack of story missions, which is insane. I mean, or everything else is already crazy monetized. And so we know by the sales numbers that this failed really hard. We don't know exact numbers, but I'll get into how we know. So no one's paying for anything. They're hemorrhaging money, and due to a lack of sales for the story missions, there won't be any financial bonuses to the devs. So usually with Blizzard, the devs will get profit sharing. So, and it used to be kind of like all meshed across the company. Well, now it's focused on each individual game. And Overwatch 2 is doing so bad that none of the devs are actually going to get a bonus, which will be the first time in Blizzard's history. So for them to not make any profit with this game, or get any bonus, really tells about the profit. They're just not making anything. They're probably even losing money at this point because, yeah, everything they've tried so far with Overwatch 2 has been a total joke. We do know that the World of Warcraft and Diablo devs, their game is profitable to some point, so they are getting bonuses. But how awful to be an Overwatch 2 dev right now. And that's just brutal. And one thing that Overwatch 2 is changing, we got this earlier in the week, finding out that they're going to make sure that the new heroes are no longer behind a paywall, starting with the next season, which is Season 10. It's hard to believe we've already had 10 seasons But yeah, Overwatch 2 just really isn't in the space anymore. Nobody talks about it. Not a lot of people stream it like they used to, and the expectations that they set for the game just have just not been very good at all. The next game we're going to talk about is Diablo 4, and it's now on Game Pass. So congratulations to those that have Game Pass that at least want to try. But I'm frustrated, and I'll tell you why. So we all know that Microsoft announced in January of 2022 that they wished to buy Activision Blizzard, and Bobby Kotick was the CEO at the time. By December of 2022, basically 11 months later, the FTC voted to file legal action against Microsoft so that they could stop the deal, saying that them buying Activision Blizzard would create basically a monopoly, and it wouldn't make the industry very competitive. They would basically get too big. And so they filed the injunction in June of 2023. The judge dismissed it in July of 23. In October of 23, Microsoft could finally get approval from most of the regulators, and they bought Activision Blizzard and closed the deal. So we had almost a completely 2-year delay on them buying Activision Blizzard. And during that time, Diablo 4 was slotted to be released on June 5th, 2023. Now, we know that they wanted to buy them all the way back in January of 2022. Now, maybe they wanted to buy at the end of the year, which would have made sense, as the money would exchange hands before the fourth quarter was up and before the year was up. And there were some details, but there was some time to work through stuff. It's not like they hadn't already been talking about this. Because you don't say you want to buy somebody without really talking to them in private first. So we know that this basically was going to happen, and they were talking about, hey, we're going to buy them, or we're wanting to buy them and do a deal. And that stuff had to get hashed out. So they only needed a few months to actually do the deal, maybe a max of 6. And it's quite possible that they could have bought them by the end of 2022. And then they could have gotten Diablo 4 as a day one launch game, which I think it still would have launched horribly, right? And like it did, because of what they were doing and what they've done with the game so far in the seasons. But Diablo wouldn't have stung so bad for the people that spent $70. Instead, for those that were on Game Pass, which it would have probably brought more players to Game Pass, the players could have just paid for Game Pass and just have a little less of the sting. Like for those of us that bought Game Pass and played Starfield, we didn't actually pay the full $70 or $100 on Starfield. We just played it through Game Pass, which is a heck of a lot cheaper. And those games together at a minimum would have been $140, which is basically paying for the Game Pass Ultimate service anyway. And, once you take away the multiplayer aspect of $60 a year. And so I'm frustrated that people had to spend $70 on Diablo 4 just to find out that it was not what they were expecting. Things were more heavily monetized. And even at this point, we have like $60 horse armor, which is just insane, or $50, whatever it is. And then they also want you to pay for like the expansions too every time they come out. And I mean, it's just a really, really expensive game for what you get. And the game isn't really any fun until you actually get to the end game anyway. So they have been making some changes, but it's not enough to really draw people back. Diablo 4 has also had some other competition, like the last Epoch and Path of the Exile, and some of those games are free. And so Diablo 4, I think it would have had a better calling, and there would have been less of a hit negatively against the game if it actually could have come to Game Pass, but that was never possible once the FTC filed some legal action and prevented Microsoft from buying Activision Blizzard, which is incredibly frustrating because, with this channel, part of this channel, folks, along with doing the news and doing the state of gaming, it's to talk about the industry and to talk about some of the scamminess and some of the fraud that's happening so that you guys can ultimately save money. Because I know sometimes I really feel screwed when I buy a game and it's not what I'm expecting, or it's not what they were exactly saying, or we all know that some publishers use certain language to try to get us hyped for stuff, and there's overhype for a lot of games lately. because they come out broken, the servers don't work, or they have to spend, the next couple of years fixing the game until it's actually playable and be in the state it should have been at launch, and etc. And so it just frustrates me that people had to find out the hard way, unfortunately. Now, there's another side of that coin, too, of course, as I'm sure some of you know, is that we can all do our own research. We can wait for after the review codes and actually wait for real people to get their hands on the game and to play them, because there's tons of review channels out there, including this one, I hope, someday, to basically review all of the AAA games and to make them enough money to be able to do that in the future through like Patreon or something. But it really frustrates me that, yeah, we have kind of this shadow over the industry, just try to get people to play games. And it being on Game Pass, it really doesn't feel like that big of a risk, because you almost have 500 other games that you can play, and you know that there's other games coming every freaking month. Sometimes you're getting games every week. I mean, we're at 485 games now on Game Pass. When I started roughly about a year ago, almost, we were at about 350 games. And so the service has grown a lot, and they're always taking games off that people don't play. And so I think Game Pass, if you do have an Xbox or a PC, it's actually a pretty good way to take a safer bet by only paying, $200 or $120 a year, depending on what service you have, just to test out some of the games. I'm glad, too, that Bobby Kotick is finally gone from Activision Blizzard, because just the amount of damage that he ensued in a few years is pretty incredible. And Activision Blizzard hasn't really had what I would call a great game in some time. And, they're not anywhere near winning Game of the Year. And Microsoft hopefully will clean some house with Activision Blizzard. I know they've already had some layoffs. Those layoffs were already planned, by the way, with Activision Blizzard. They've also had layoffs within their own company and their own studios and stuff. But yeah, I'm hoping Microsoft can turn Activision Blizzard around, but that's really going to take a lot of work. And they're going to have to show that. They're going to have to prove that to players. So next, let's talk about the Rise of Ronin. So this is just a PlayStation exclusive. I think it is also on PC as well. And so far, it's actually doing pretty good. It's doing pretty good. But it's not great, and we'll get into a little bit of that. So on Metacritic, the professional critics give it a 76, and the users give it an 8.3 on PlayStation 5, which usually the users are a little lower, but the users are liking this. Now, this is made by Team Ninja, and so they've made Neo, Wulong Fallen Dynasty, Dead or Alive, Hyrule Warriors. They've made quite a, Metroid Other M, I think, is another one they've made. So they've made quite a few games, but they're well known for kind of the Japanese-style Dark Souls-like games. Now, Rise of Ronin is an open-world game, but it's kind of built with markers and a little compass and stuff, kind of like the Assassin's Creed games, or like other Ubisoft titles that we know and love with all of the stuff on the screen. It kind of looks like that. Not as bad, but we can kind of get that. The combat itself is actually pretty fun, and there's a lot of varied things, including stances. And if you've played Neo or Wulong Fallen Dynasty, you know that. You know kind of the combat system that they've had. And there's also quite a bit different areas and regions on the open world map, which is nice. But the biggest issues that people have, were what I was scrolling through on user reviews on Metacritic, is that the graphics seem dated. And we're not talking about just like the graphics don't work. It's like it's all functioning like it should, but the character models look old and look a little dated, and some of the textures are like popping in instead of being there by the time you get there. And so things aren't quite optimized and loading well into the game, but it's definitely not as bad as Dragon's Dogma. You don't have to worry about that. Also, there's way too much loot. So it just, again, it feels like another looter shooter almost, except this is a stabber shooter. A stabber looter, excuse me. And you have so much loot that you don't care about, so much loot that just doesn't matter, and you're just looking for particular colors, just kind of like in Destiny or like in The Division, where it's like, ooh, hey, blue, purple, and yellow, or gold, that's what I'm going for. And the rest of it just clogs up your inventory real bad, and so you constantly got to manage that. It also has kind of a forgettable story. There's no spoilers with this, but just there's really not much for the story. You're kind of on a mission of vengeance, But it's very easy to get sidetracked from that and not necessarily kind of even remember of what you're doing or what you're really focused on. You're just, going through the world, enjoying the combat and playing the game. Also, too, the side missions are kind of grindy, right? You're going to clear forts, you're going to clear camps, and so some of the mission aspects of the game really are just grindy, just kind of filler, and just kind of opening regions up. And we know that with also Ubisoft games too, whether it's Divisions or Assassin's Creed with open worlds, you kind of have regions or areas to move up, and we kind of expect that. So this game is not bad, but it's not necessarily memorable either. It's kind of in the middle. So again, this kind of gets a C plus so far from people that have played it and from the critics. Things that are good is that it has a really good character creator. There's actually some fairly good attire that you can put your character and kind of create your own character with just the attire itself, let alone all of the other facial and hair and stuff. There's a companion system that actually works really good, and so it's not just you working with them, it's that they actually build skills too, which is cool. Kind of like in Dragon's Dogma, and you can build a relationship with your other companions, and they can help you in fights and stuff, and they can also be geared toward a certain type of style or vocation or skill that you can work up with them, which is kind of neat. So that's a little more dynamic than we're used to. The combat is fun. Again, there's different weapons, there's different stances, there's different skills, there's different skill trees, there's all sorts of different stuff. You can level up weapons, and there's different types of weapons too. And so it's really interesting to actually be able to kind of play and engage the way you'd like with the combat. The combat is also more forgiving, which is nice. If you ever played any of the Neo games or Nioh games, you know that those are just absolutely flippin' brutal. I couldn't even finish them, folks. Those are insane. And then it's also a little more forgiving than most Dark Souls games. And so you do have to know how to parry. You do have to know how to kind of be out of the way and line up some of your combos and stuff. And the combos can kind of get a little old in the combat sometimes. They can get kind of elongated where you're having to constantly block or shift or dodge or whatever from your enemies. But overall, the combat system is pretty well done. So if you've played Rise of Ronin, hey, let us know in the comments what you think and what you're playing it on, what platform, and about how many hours you've played into it. So there's already a few reviews out there of what people think, but that's kind of the gist of it so far. Finally, we have some word on XDefiant. Again, this was a game that was supposed to come out in the summer of 2023. This was supposed to be possibly the COD killer and was going to be a free-to-play model where they were going to monetize everything else. And, we just kind of heard it had to get approval from the different platforms that it was going to be on, and then we just didn't really hear anything. Just kind of disappeared. And so it's hey, so finally we got an update, finding out that, one of the head honchos over there says that the game is having major technical issues. It worked fine in the beta, which they tested on PC, but when scaled up, the issues compound, they become a lot more easier to see, and it drastically affects the game. There's also issues with their anti-cheat software that they're running. Again, this is compounded when they scale up, so that's not good. And still, there's no release date. It's just sometime in 2024, and I don't even know if they're going to make that at this point, because you would think if it was coming at least in the summertime, which is, we're in spring now, basically. That's only a few months away. We got 4 months until we're in summer, and I highly doubt we're going to get it in the spring. And so my kind of guess is that when it's ready, when it's done, they're going to know when it's ready. They're going to, quickly say, hey, it's coming out in 6 weeks or 8 weeks. Go ahead and pre-order or play or whatever. And, that'll be very interesting when it actually launches. But yeah, they're having some major technical issues they didn't expect. And again, this is an Ubisoft game, and it's just not launching very well. They also had Skull and Bones, which did horrible. And then we also have Star Wars Outlaws, which is also supposed to be later this year, which it was supposed to launch earlier this year, but that didn't happen. Kind of had a quiet delay. And then I don't think we're going to get Star Wars Outlaws in the summer either. Again, we're roughly 4 or 5 months away, and we still don't have a launch date for Outlaws. And so I just think there's some brutalness happening over at Ubisoft. Maybe some stuff we don't know about, we're not hearing about, but clearly the way in which their games are launching or being delayed, or there's just really not much out there at all with updates of what's going on, I think really shows that there's some turmoil happening within the company and within some of these studios. Otherwise, we wouldn't be seeing this. We know, too, that Assassin's Creed Red, which is supposed to be part of the, Assassin's Creed Infinite type of model that they're building, where there's going to be multiple games that are going to be linked together, is that there's no date for this either. Again, this is supposed to be maybe 24, maybe 25, but there's just really nothing concrete about when this game is going to come out. And the same was with Mirage. Okay, they even delayed that game, which it was still buggy. The combat still wasn't very great. The stealth was kind of a mess. And some of the game mechanics also didn't mesh very well. And so, your stealth didn't work very well because your character and weapons was more designed toward actual face-to-face combat. And so stealth was actually kind of difficult and broken and frustrating. And some of the building design and level designs were frustrating too. And even with the delay, this game was still just didn't have very good cutscenes, was just kind of bad with some of the story. And now we have another Assassin's Creed game, Assassin's Creed Red, where it's like, okay, what's going on with this? We don't know. And the only game that they've had recently that sold over 10 million copies was Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. And that's kind of been it. There hasn't been much else. So I think Ubisoft is in a little bit of trouble because we have multiple games here that didn't launch good, weren't ready at all. Like Skull and Bones is basically a dead game already. And then the other games that are supposed to be coming, we don't know when they're supposed to be here. And I just find it really weird this year that it's like a lot of games are set up this way. We don't actually have a definitive release date. And I find that really odd. It's the first time I've seen it like this. Something too, we're going to be getting a Sims movie. Now picture this. Think of a game you would like to see on the big screen. Okay? Maybe Halo, maybe Jak and Dexter. We got to see Uncharted. We've gotten to see Five Nights at Freddy's. Maybe you'd like to see, some more Spider-Man. Or maybe you'd like to see Horizon Zero Dawn. The Last of Us has become a TV show. So there's some options there, right? You wouldn't think of The Sims. I wouldn't anyway, right? And so apparently the director has already been picked. This is already being worked on. And the director is going to be the one that directed Loki, the TV show for Disney+. Which that was the only good show, in my opinion, for the last several years. The studio that this is going to be done in, and the publisher, if you want to put it that way, is going to be Mario Robbie's studio, which I didn't know she had one. So she was the main actress in Barbie, and she's also done other stuff too, like The Wolf of Wall Street, or I'm drawing a blank. Suicide Squad. She's got really well known for that. But yeah, apparently she has her own movie studio, and so she's got some money. So yeah, they're working on making this game, but I can't see her being in it. I can't imagine Sims being very good, because again, it's just kind of talking about life. I don't know. I'm not sure really what to make of this one. I'm not excited for it at all, that's for sure. I'm not a fan. I don't think this is going to be great. And two, I would rather have more actual games and more iterations in an IP or new IPs instead of just focusing on turning games into movies. But ever since we had that Mario animated movie come out, I think last year, that made $1 billion or $1.3 billion, we've just seen more shows and movies coming from video games. And most of them aren't really doing that great. But the budgets are smaller, they're cheaper to make, there's less risk at this time. And so I think there, some publishers and owners of IPs are seeing that as dollar signs. Hey, it's a smaller investment and it has a better chance of actually making money. Maybe we should try that instead. And so I do have a State of Gaming. I'm going to try to remember to link at the end of this where it's games to movies. And it's just kind of a list of all of the games that have come out, or the movies and shows that have come out based on games so far in the last few years, and then the ones that are coming. And it's a crazy list. Like, we got a bunch. And it's not like this is a new idea, but just we're having a lot more coming forward in the last few years and planned for the next few years than what's normal. And so we got another one, The Sims. Imagine that. Lastly, we're going to talk about Starfield. So the lead quest designer was seen at Game Dev Conference 2024. And someone asked him, hey, kind of what happened with Starfield? And he had some things to say since he doesn't work at the company anymore. And so he said that the ending was rushed, which is something you don't want to hear. And the company decided that even with a delay, they were finding out they couldn't really decide on the final location for the ending to kind of wrap it all together and have a really satisfying action-packed ending. And so, since they were running out of time and they didn't want to delay again, they already delayed for 10 months, folks. And so, well, they just decided to use some old assets that they had already designed to save on time. And basically, he said, push the panic button to create the final mission. Now, I'm not going to spoil what it is if you haven't finished it. But the idea was that this was supposed to be an action-packed finale with possible, like, space battles and all of this type of stuff and wrap it all together. But instead, we got the ending that we got, which really just doesn't seem to fit. It's kind of boring. It's pretty anticlimactic for the most part. And then again, it was just old assets used to just kind of put something together, and that's what we got. And that's not something we would expect from Bethesda. And I'm also shocked, too, that it's like, why couldn't they think of an ending? Did they have kind of a disagreement on what the ending should be or what the main lesson should be? Maybe there's just some disagreements there, and so they said, well, we're just going to shove something together because we're running out of time. And so, yeah, unfortunately, that is not what we wanted to hear. And I got to say, too, it's disappointing. Because, again, Bethesda is a studio I really enjoy. I really like their games. They have some wonderful IPs. And in my opinion, Starfield as well. But, like, Starfield just did not meet expectations. In my opinion, there was too much procedural or AI generation with the landscape and just made it kind of boring. And it is the smoothest Bethesda game I've ever played at launch. But again, I didn't pay full price for it. I just got it with day one on Game Pass, and so I didn't feel as big of a blow. But if you got it for Game Pass, share down below, like, if you bought it full price, or even for some of us, there were 2 million people on Steam that bought the Early Access Edition, so that's $100. And, I mean, did you like it? How did you feel about it? What were some parts, if they did, that let you down? For me, it was the caves. I loved exploring those, and then finding out that they're just kind of a hole in the ground. It's like, wow, that actually really sucks. That hit me harder than I expected. I love the shipbuilding, though. That's so fun. We did find out that the DLC is going to have new assets, new quests, new locations, likely some new characters, too. I'm putting that last one in there. And we're expecting at some point, again, with no release date, sometime in 2024. And we're already we're already halfway through. We're 6 months through when Starfield launched. And it's like they have another 6 months. So is the idea for it to come out in September, maybe? Or August? I don't know. We know, too, that this is the only DLC that they're making. And this isn't necessarily a DLC. It's more of an expansion. But again, they're building it in about a year, maybe a year and a half-ish. I don't know. I'm not necessarily sold. I'm not going to buy it until it's maybe on sale or something like that, and then I'll buy it and pick it up and I'll play it later. I will eventually buy a physical copy, too, because you can buy those for about $20-25, which is really dang cheap. And if any of you are interested, I can actually make you guys one of their custom controllers because the parts are really cheap now. And I can do one either for Xbox One, Xbox Series X, or I can do the ones for the Elite, I think it's Elite 2 controllers. So if you're interested, go and contact me on Twitch and leave me a whisper, and then we'll banter back and forth and figure stuff out with price or whatever. Or I could just ship you the parts too, or tell you where to go. I don't care. Yeah, but if you'd like, I can actually build it for you myself. It would take some time, of course, and I would need the controller here in Oregon, but we can figure out shipping and all that if you're interested. So hopefully you guys are doing well, and I just want to remind you to, take time to spend time with your families and your friends, people that love you, that are genuine. If you don't have any, okay, go find some, because it's so worth it, folks. It's so much just more life-giving and satisfying of a life to have that. And yeah, you got to be a little vulnerable to find those types of people that really care and love you for you. But boy, yeah, they're worth finding. Because yeah, we had a bridge collapse in Baltimore, and it killed some people. And it was an accident, as far as we know. But a container ship hit a pylon on a 1.5 mile long bridge, and some people were commuting to work, and they got caught on the bridge, wrong place, wrong time. And yeah, I just feel for those families that are affected by that. And yeah, things happen all the time, folks. And just because folks are young or folks are careful doesn't mean they're going to be around tomorrow. Death happens. And, we got to take every opportunity we can in real time to invest in those relationships. So just take some time to do that. So with that, folks, thanks for tuning in. Again, you can always find me at Gaming Garbage 22 over on YouTube, and Don't Tread on Thee on Twitch. And if you're interested in a Starfield controller, or in the future a Fallout controller, let me know. Send me a whisper on Twitch, and we can banter about and figure it out. And with that, folks, I'll see you guys on the next one.